Welcome to Choose Your Own Adventure, a day in the life of a therapist. You're a therapist heading into the office at 9 a.m. You open the door, fire up your coffee, and are immediately met with your first decision of the day. Option A. You frantically dig for last week's intake form, mentally retrace whether you ever sent that questionnaire, try to push out 10 session reminders, and attempt to reschedule 4 clients using your mind's eye, because let's be honest, that beautiful planner that you bought, still blank. Or option B. You open your laptop, sip your delicious coffee, and see everything lined up like a dream. Intakes, done. Reminders, sent. Notes, teed up. And your crisp, clean calendar, just begging to be gently rescheduled, not wrestled with. If you choose B, you're using simple practice. If you choose A, we love you and you deserve better. Make the switch, your future self will high-five you right after they finish their notes on time. Simple practice, your day simplified. Simple Practice is offering a 7-day free trial, then 70% off for 4 months, plus a free 30 days of AI Note Taker. That's right, if you sign up in the month of July, you'll get a 7-day free trial, then 70% off for 4 months, plus a free 30 days of AI Note Taker. Sign up today at the link in our show notes or head to creativetherapyumbrella.com/simplepractice. Again, you can check this out in our show notes or head to creativetherapyumbrella.com/simplepractice.
Well, hello there. I am recording from, my house, but I'm recording during my daughter's nap time, and there's lots of lawnmowers going right now, so this is going to be a fun one. I am trying to squeeze in these mini episodes that just have some fun tips and tricks about different creative things, different creative approaches in therapy, things that I've learned, just quick little tips, techniques, ideas, all of this stuff. And today's episode actually came to me because I unfortunately struggle with insomnia. And this morning I woke up at 5 o'clock, which is not my normal wake up time. I like to sleep until like 7-ish. Again, insomnia. So I have a very difficult time sleeping. But I woke up and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go for a bike ride. And I was on my bike, and it was like the best thing ever because I almost ran over a squirrel, which was actually really funny. It was more of a funny experience. And I saw an opossum. I went by this really cool cemetery that I've never seen before that had really old, what are they called? Gravestones. And then I also stopped a couple times to do some geocaching. I did not find any geocaches. I failed. But it was really fun. I got bit by 9,000 mosquitoes, but it was totally cool. And so it got me thinking about failing forward. And not only did I fail at sleeping and getting enough sleep, but I failed at, getting the geocaches. And, I could really look at the morning as this failure, but I did end up like turning it around. However, it really makes me think about the idea of failing forward with clients. And this is something that I talked a lot about in my Cultivating Creative Resiliency course, which is back up, by the way, currently awaiting approval for CBMT credits. But anyway, it got me thinking about, kind of like having some scripts, or like a lot of times I'll call them back pocket phrases when you're a therapist, to support kids, tweens, and teens with this idea of thinking about failing forward. On the front end, I want to say this is not to be used in a toxic positivity way of like, if a kid's really struggling with something that happened and you're like, well, what did you learn from it? Like, no. Making space for the hard feelings, embarrassment, sadness, grief that might come from a situation. But failing forward, I think, can be used, especially in situations where anxiety is present, where there's a lot of black and white or all or nothing thinking. I think, again, this is where we need to be screening for trauma and stuff like that too, because if this is something that might have happened in a situation where a kid's getting bullied, or there's traumatic experiences in the home, then this might not go well and could be gaslighty, and we do not want that to happen. So I feel like I'll always probably have uh, a note, an asterisk on the front end of a lot of different interventions. But so if we think about, in not those cases, in cases where, maybe a kiddo is struggling with social anxiety, this is one I deal with a lot of the clients that I work with. How can we then help them see a failure as actually coming out of a situation with a bunch of positive things, as well as sitting with the negative of whatever did happen? I know for me, this takes a lot of acceptance and kind of like sitting with the discomfort. Sometimes you might want to wallow. I tend to do that, especially when I can't sleep and I'm grumpy and I just want to like me, this sucks. And, which is like, sometimes I do have to do that, but other times there are ways to think about flipping that. And so, I thought about how I would have never, seen this really cool graveyard, or saw an opossum this morning, or went on my bike ride, which was really, really nice and really enjoyable. I would have never seen this park that I had never been to that I tried to go geocaching at. So, I'm able to do that, but helping teens, tweens, kids build this skill takes some time. So some tips and tricks I really like to use. One of them is the phrase, let's thicken the plot. And this comes from narrative therapy, and it's really kind of seeing narrative therapy in action. So it's really helping someone rewrite what they're experiencing or what they're talking about. So if a kid comes in and is like, oh my gosh, like the classic, the person at the register said to me, enjoy your lunch, and I said, you too. Which I still do that as an adult, as a socially awkward adult. I do it all the time. But, how do we help a teen or tween move through this? So one way you might say, they might be like, I felt so dumb, and they probably think that I'm an idiot and XYZ, they're coming up with all these different things that they're kind of stuck in that very all or nothing thinking. I'll often say like, wait, hold on a second. Let's like thicken this plot, because if this was a movie, this feels like a really thin plot that you say something and then the other character, the NPC, the non-player character, or if the kid is the main character, that seems really thin. That doesn't seem like we can go anywhere or tell a story with that. So, if some things you could say is like, what would happen to you, or what would happen to your favorite character after a moment like this in a show you like, or if you were in a show, what do you think would actually happen? Is there a plot twist? If this is just one episode, if this is the ending of an episode, which is a really fun one, I like to do like, oof, if this was a cliffhanger, what do you think would happen on like, what would be the next intro for the next episode? The last like 6 seconds of a show that you see, and it's like, you kind of get a little bit of what's going to happen, kind of giving them some of that so that they can thicken the plot. Because if we go with what we're originally thinking when anxiety first takes a hold, or sadness, or whatever the feeling is, it's usually just like, that's it, that's the end, my reputation is ruined, or that person will never talk to me again. And it's like, well, there's not really a lot of episodes we can make after that. So thickening the plot. With some kids, you can get into like, you can just deep dive into stuff like this. This could be rewriting, scripts, actually physically writing scripts. Putting soundtracks to stuff like this is so much fun. Using comic strips and drawing it, storyboarding it. There's so many different ways that you can take this. As someone who uses D&D in sessions all the time, this is such a great way to bring in character development. Anything that you can use, I think, could really, really come into play so well with this idea of, let's thicken the plot. Another back pocket one that I like to use all the time is, and this is really like self-compassion. This is the practice of self-compassion, because I know most of the kids that I see are incredibly compassionate individuals. But when it comes to providing that compassion back to themselves, I'm also guilty of this. It's way harder. So I'll often say something like, well, what would you say to your best friend if they made this mistake or if they made this failure or whatever? I like to use the verbiage or the language that the client is using. Um, so kind of using this mirror to offer and foster that self-compassion. I also think of this in like a parts language or IFS terminology, in that when a kiddo is sitting in the room kind of in that space of like, oh my gosh, that they're never going to talk to me again, they hate me, they are currently in a part, they're in anxiety, in sadness, in panic, whatever it is. They're not in their like wise mind or capital S self. So how can we kick them back to that? And this is one of those little like, I shouldn't say kick, that sounds terrible. Like, how can we gently nudge them back to that? um that if they are if we just kind of pepper them with questions, they might not be able to get back to that wiser mind, that kind of looking at the bigger picture space. But if we say like, oh well, what would you say to your best friend, they're almost immediately able to hop back to that kind of wise mind space. So from there, once I can see that they're kind of in more of that kind of a space, though they're in their wise mind or their self energy, or like their anxiety part is not currently in their body taking over, then we can move on to like, well, did you gain anything from this, or what do you think you'll do next time? I can see some really brave things that you did just by doing XYZ. What can you see from that? Is it really all or nothing? Another one that's really fun is uh again, this is a D&D reference, but really it kind of comes up in any type of gamer stuff. It comes up in uh I think it comes up in a lot of like media, a lot of different medias. Is every character has their thing, and we just got distracted by a side quest. Like, I laugh because it's really like the story of my life is just a bunch of little side quests added together versus one main character arc. I think that's probably part of my own neurodivergence, is just lots of side quests. But I think there's something really validating about that. That maybe this scene or this little side quest is just something, it's not the whole character development arc, and it's not the whole thing, it's not the all, and really it's like, oh well, this was just an embarrassing cutscene, or this is just the outtake from the practicing that you were doing in the studio with music. And so really reframing that as like, this is part of what we do all the time, it's normalizing. And then it can be really funny and validating of side quests or cutscenes or whatever it is. Again, I always like to use the preferred media of the kids that I'm working with. So, and then you can really follow up with kind of like, well, what's the next, I think video game terminology, well, what's the next power up? How are you going to gain more XP experience points? What comes next from this? So these are kind of just these things that I think are back pocket things that you can use and just kind of have there. What would you say to your friend? How would this look? Can we thicken the plot? And can this really just be a side quest? Kind of just these ideas of taking something, a mistake or something that seemed like a failure, or when someone is in that all or nothing thinking, and gently, not kicking, gently pulling them back to a space where they can see the whole picture and see how really this isn't a failure, but this is failing forward, and really that every failure is failing forward. This is something I talk about all the time with D&D, Dungeons and Dragons in therapy, because you roll a 20-sided die to determine pretty much anything you do in the game. And so a lot of what happens in the game is determined by chaos. It's completely randomized. So you can have something that you really, really desperately want to do, and you can roll the dice and get a 1, which is a critical failure. And so in therapy, when we're using Dungeons and Dragons in therapy, we make that a critical failure forward. So, someone may, they're like, well, I really want to climb this tree so that I can look over this stone wall to spy on the bad guys who are in this castle. And I say, okay, well, roll your d20, and let's see if you get above an 11, then it will be some type of a success. If it's 10 and under, then it's a failure. A 1 on the dice is a critical failure, and a natural 20 or a 20 on the dice is a critical success. So let's say they get a critical failure, then I might say something like, okay, so you go and you climb up the tree and you're about 20 feet up. And then all of a sudden, the one branch that you put your foot on breaks. You tumble down the tree. You take 3 points of slashing damage from all of these trees. But from this vantage point on the ground, you see that there is a brick loose on this wall that looks like enough space for someone who about your stature could fit through. So it's again an example of how we would do this in game and practice failing forward, where I actually might, if I was in game, I might let that settle a little bit more, like the disappointment, and not really quick come in with the failing, the forward part, but then kind of add that in as flavor a little bit later, because again, we don't want to gloss over the negative feelings or the disappointment or whatever it is. We want to hold space for that, and then when there's more of that wise mind or more of that self kind of space, then we can move into like, okay, well, what did we get from this, or what did we learn, or is there anything else that we got? So again, these are just a few examples of failing forward, and how we can kind of bring these into sessions all the time. These back pocket phrases are things I feel like are just so helpful. I'm a huge proponent for back pocket phrases as someone who has speaking difficulty. So again, I'll just re-say those again. The first one that we did was let's thicken the plot. Let's thicken this plot a little bit because this sounds really thin. Another one is that we would bringing in the self-compassion. So, what would you say to your best friend if they made this mistake? And then another one is like, well, maybe this is just a side quest, or this is a cut scene. So I think a lot in media and movies and stuff too. So thickening the plot, what would your best friend say to this? And every character stumbles. This is just a side quest. And again, use your client's preferred media or preferred things that they like. If it's video games or if it's My Little Pony or whatever it is, use that terminology when bringing these things in, and I feel like it goes way farther and you can get really into it. So let me know how this goes. Again, if you like this stuff, hop on my newsletter. A lot of times, whatever I'm talking about on the podcast will be included in the newsletter. And so there's, you can have this in printable format and stuff like that. So that is a place to check us out. So there's a link in the show notes where you can sign up for that, and follow us on Instagram too. Come hang out. Throw us an email, leave a review. We'd love to hear from you, especially since we're getting things started again. We'd love to know what you are looking for and what would serve you. So please feel free to reach out. And of course, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you're at, your evening, your morning, and be creative.